Reali-Tea, come to our court of session. Any matters we need to address before the jury returns?
No, thank you. From the defense.
Nothing to state, Your Honor.
Thank you, Sheriff, and you're
Oh,
ready.
Your Honor, I
Hold on, Sheriff.
We do, there is one issue the state would like to address, or rather just update
Yes.
the court and defense counsel with respect to the workers' compensation
All right.
records. Those are being sought. I have been told that they have been requested, and there is an expectation that those records will be sent electronically. We do not have an expected time of arrival, so I do not know if that will be today or tomorrow or whenever, but there is someone in my office who will print them and place them in a sealed envelope and deliver them to the court when they are here, although given what could be potentially the sensitive nature of the personal information contained within those records, I believe we would probably need an order for that.
All right.
And I do have copies of the email, Your Honor, for the court and for Mr. Charles.
All right, thank you. We'll just keep that as part of our update. Okay.
May I approach?
Yes. Thank you. When those documents come in, let me know. I'll get a quick order. I'll type up a quick order. I don't have my computer up here or printer up here or anything else up here right now, but, and we'll just monitor it as things develop.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you very much for your update. All right, now, Sheriff, yours can return. All right, let the record reflect on our jurors are in their seats. State, call your next witness.
The state calls Officer Richards.
Do you solemnly swear that the testimony you shall now give the jury and the court in the case now being heard shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I swear.
Good afternoon, sir.
Good afternoon.
Please tell the jury your name.
Andre Richards.
How are you employed, sir?
I'm a corporal with the City of Durham Police Department. I currently work in the Special Victims Unit.
And how long have you been a corporal with the Durham Police Department, sir?
I've been a corporal about a little over a year and a half, and I've been employed with the police department for 9 years.
What were your duties before becoming corporal?
Before that, I was in a homicide unit. I was an investigator.
And before that?
Before that, I was a District 2 investigator, and before that, I was a patrol officer in District 2 as well.
And what were your duties on December 18th of 2012?
In December 18th, I was one of the members of the homicide unit.
Were you working in on duty on December 18th of 2012?
Yes, that's correct. I was on duty.
What were your duties that day?
That particular day, I was at headquarters working on some other cases when I heard that an officer had been shot.
Do you recall about what time you received that information?
I believe it was approximately 10 o'clock, but it was right after the initial call came out, whatever time that was.
What did you do upon hearing that information?
The first thing I did was I got in my car and I was going to head to the scene, which is only about 2 or 3 minutes away from headquarters. But once I got to Duke and Club, I got some information that the possible suspect vehicle was on Newcastle Road, so I immediately diverted to Newcastle Road, and I never did go to the scene.
Where on Newcastle Road did you go?
Right then, there was already like a large perimeter with a lot of officers set up, and they had an apartment in particular picked out. I believe it's 1336 Newcastle.
Your Honor, objection cumulative.
Overruled.
What did you do upon arrival?
I talked to the officers that were on scene, and I gathered enough information to do a search warrant.
And did you indeed obtain that search warrant?
Yes, that's correct, I did. I went back to headquarters, typed out the search warrant, and then swore to it.
What did you do after that?
I went back to Newcastle Road and presented the search warrant. At that time, as soon as I got there, I was told that there was some more information on Rosetta, and that I needed to go to Rosetta and do another search warrant. So that's what I did.
So let me back you up a minute, Corporal Richards. You went to Newcastle and you presented the search warrant.
Yes, ma'am.
Did you execute that search warrant?
I executed. I couldn't stay there for the entire search.
And then you responded to Rosetta?
Yes, that's correct.
Approximately when did you do that?
I can check my notes for the exact time, that I got there.
What did you do when you got to Rosetta?
Once I got to Rosetta, I got down the basic information that I needed for another search warrant on Rosetta. And then I went and swore to another search warrant for Rosetta. And then I came back to Rosetta with that search warrant.
And what was the Rosetta address, if there was one, for the search warrant?
I believe that address is 1718. I'd like to check my notes just to be 100% sure.
All right, do you have those with you?
I don't.
What did you do did you get a search warrant for Rosetta?
Yes, I did get PC for a search warrant. I got the search warrant signed, and when I brought it back, I waited with forensics while they processed the scene.
Describe the scene at Rosetta when you arrived.
When I arrived, I was briefed that there had been other people there already, as far as other people that lived at the address. I didn't talk to any people that lived there. I did the initial walk through the house and a walk through the backyard, and I got the keys from one of the family members that lives there. That's in my notes.
What did you do next?
Next, I stayed with, as far as that day, I stayed with forensics until they finished processing the scene.
What, if anything, during the search did you locate at Rosetta?
I turned in a list of everything that was recovered within the search warrant, and I'd like to refer to that before giving the specifics.
Do you have that document with you?
I don't have that document with me.
Permission to approach the witness, Your Honor.
Yes.
Corporal Richards, I'm approaching you with a document that has been marked as State's Exhibit 19 for identification purposes. Would you take a look at that document and tell the court what it is?
Yes, ma'am. This is the inventory of items seized. It's a standard when we do a search warrant that anything we seize from the residence, we fill out this inventory, and it has a list of items that we seized from 1718 Rosetta.
And was that form completed by you?
Yes, that's correct.
Would that form refresh your recollection?
Yes, it does.
And would it aid you in your testimony today?
Yes, it does.
You can take a look at that and take a few moments to read it and refresh your recollection.
Okay, I'm ready. Okay.
Tell the court what, if anything, was located during the search of Rosetta.
During the search of 1718 Rosetta, we seized a folding knife, a pair of shorts, a black shirt, a red shirt, blue jeans, a green towel with blood on it, a blue sweatshirt, and a box of Newport cigarettes.
Thank you, sir. Where were those items located?
Forensics would have the specific locations of where the items were located.
What, if anything else, did you do at 1718 Rosetta on that day?
That was all I did.
Did you have any other involvement in this case?
Yes, I did.
When did that involvement occur?
Over the next several days, I was involved in the case.
What were your actions on the next day, December 19th?
So on the next day, I went with Corporal McMaster to the hospital, to Duke Hospital, to attempt to talk to Officer Stewart about everything that happened.
And you said attempt. Why did
Yes.
you say attempt?
I say attempt because due to his medical condition, honestly, he looked up and acknowledged me, but I couldn't tell if he even recognized who I was or anything. So at that point in time, I didn't want to try to get a statement from him.
Describe his condition when you saw him.
He looked to be in pain of somebody who's, obviously in this job I deal with people that have suffered things like gunshot wounds, and he looked to be somebody in pain that was going through recovery. I just remember the way he looked. The way he looked up at me, it didn't look like he recognized me or anything, and it looked like the medications or something might have been kicking in. And at that time, I was just wondering if he was going to be able to return to work or walk again.
Your Honor, motion to strike about what he thought.
As to that last statement, motion strikes allowed.
Corporal Richards, what, if anything else, did you do on December 19th?
At that time, on December 19th, we were also looking for some missing items, such as a badge and a gun. And we started driving up and down and through Newcastle. We went on foot a couple times through Newcastle Road and through Stadium Drive to look for like a badge or a gun or any other evidence.
Now, when you say we, who else was with you?
Myself, Corporal McMaster, and I believe there were several other units involved.
What, if anything, did you find?
I believe on that date, that particular date, I'd have to check my notes, but I believe the stuff was found on another day.
Did you have any other involvement in this case?
Yes, we received information that a person that works at Bullseye Bicycles had actually recovered Officer Stewart's cell phone, and myself and Corporal McMaster went down there and talked to that individual, and he showed us the phone.
And were you able to take that phone with you?
Yes, we were able to take the phone. I wasn't the one that physically took the phone into custody, but we took the phone, and we also rode back with him to the area where he found it, and we were eventually able to find, I believe it was the cell phone case that went with the phone.
Thank you so much. Those are all my questions at this time, Your Honor.
Thank you. Questions of the officer, Mr. Chong?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good afternoon, Corporal Richards.
Good afternoon, sir.
In the search at Rosetta, you did research about who the homeowner was or the person that lived there, is that right?
Yes, I did.
And at Rosetta, that address, it was Carlos Riley's mother, is that correct?
I don't recall who specifically is on the deed.
So you don't recall who lived there?
I got information that he lived there, whatever, I'd have to check the search warrant and see what's in the probable cause.
Okay, but you don't recall as you sit there that information, is that correct?
No, I don't.
In part of your probable cause statement on those search warrants was early on, you received information that there was a chase in the woods or something to that effect on one of those search warrants?
Yes.
Okay. So there was a chase outside the car and the officer was injured. The gun was discharged, but it was outside the car after a chase.
I'd like to refer to the specific line of search warrant if that's possible.
I'm just asking you what you remember. You remember there was a chase outside the car, right? I'm saying that's just what your probable cause was.
I may be confused on the line that you're talking about, that's why I'd like to refer to the specific line of search warrant if that's possible.
And your search warrant was based on information you had at the time, and information may have come up after that search warrant that changed what was known about the incident, correct? Is that fair to say?
I'd say that's fair to say in any search warrant.
Okay. So you're proceeding on what you were told, information that was passed on at the time when things were developing, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
Thank you. And at Rosetta Drive, you listed on the inventory, and isn't that just a receipt for what was taken from the house? Is that a good description of what an inventory is?
That's a fair description.
Okay. And so for those items, would the forensics team be the ones that would know whether fingerprints were taken, for example?
Yes, that's correct.
Same thing with DNA?
Yes.
Same thing with the cell phone or the case, the forensics would be the people to ask about whether DNA was attempted to be taken or fingerprints, is that right?
DNA, forensics or the lead investigator would be the ones.
And the items that were seized, they were turned into property, correct?
Yes.
And property is a location the Durham Police Department has to store items that might be of relevance to any particular criminal case, correct?
Yes.
I may have a moment, Your Honor.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Your Honor, that would be my questions at this time.
Thank you. Any questions on redirect?
No, Your Honor.
Thank you, Officer.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Your Honor, at this time, the state would call Allison Hutchins to the stand.
solemnly swear that the testimony you should now give the court in the case now being heard shall be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
Yes. Hello, ma'am.
Hello.
How are you doing?
Fine, thank you.
Ma'am, could you please state your name and occupation for the court and tell the jury?
My name is Allison Hutchins. I'm crime scene supervisor. I'm the forensic services supervisor of the Durham Police Department.
And ma'am, how long have you been in that role?
I've been enrolled as a crime lab supervisor for 6 months. I've been with the police department for 6 years.
And tell us about those 6 years, the different positions that you've held at the Durham Police Department.
I was hired as the crime scene supervisor. I held that role for 5.5 years, and then I moved over to supervise the crime lab.
And can you tell the jury the differences between those roles?
As the crime scene supervisor, I supervised 16 crime scene investigators. So I oversaw their general day-to-day duties, approved the reports, and ensured they were following the standard operating procedures of the unit. The crime lab supervisor, I supervised latent print section, the firearms section, and the digital forensics section. It's a very similar position in terms of supervision, just at different disciplines.
Thank you, ma'am. Now, on December 18, 2012, do you recall how you were employed by the Durham Police Department?
Yeah, I was the crime lab supervisor at that time. I'm sorry, crime scene supervisor at that time. And
do you recall responding to a call at 1619 Forest Road on that day?
Yes, I do.
And can you tell me how it came to your desk?
I was notified by the crime scene specialist, who was a shift supervisor, who was on duty that day.
And who was that?
Marilyn Coble.
And how did she contact you?
Verbally, we were both in the office.
And when she advised you about this scene that was coming, or that was in process, what, if anything, did you do?
We made arrangements to wait until we were requested and then respond to the scene together as a team.
And when did you initially receive this call? Or when did you receive notification that this call was being worked?
In terms of the time?
Yes.
May I refer to my report?
Yes.
We arrived at the scene at approximately 11:15 hours, so it probably would have been maybe 30 to 45 minutes before that we were advised.
Okay. And do you recall who did request your presence at the scene?
Corporal McMaster, homicide corporal.
And is he here in the courtroom today?
Yes, he is.
Okay, and can you point him out for me, please?
He is a gentleman sitting at the end of the table.
Okay, which
The
end?
prosecutor, I'm sorry, the prosecutor's table, 2 seats down from you.
Thank you. And can you tell me what, if anything, you did once you arrived on the scene?
We briefed with Corporal McMaster and Sergeant Pennica, which is standard. They give us a summary of what they know at that point, what they believe had occurred, and then give us some information on things they would like for us to do.
And what was the brief? What did he say to you?
I don't recall specifics, other than basically there's information that we had an officer shot and that requested that we process the scene.
And when you process a scene, you've received training in this?
Yes, I have.
And can you explain that training that you have received?
I started as a crime scene investigator in Chandler, Arizona in 1998. I've attended several schools over the years in terms of crime scene investigation, photography, latent print processing, documentation.
Now, in a scene such as this, what would your standard operating procedure be to process a scene this large?
Well, we start off doing a walkthrough, usually with homicide personnel, again with them giving us information on what they know. We take notes, write down our observations as we go, as well as what we were told. Our normal procedures then usually to videotape and photograph the scene as is.
Now, you say that you did do a walkthrough,
Yes, we did.
and do you recall what you saw as you walked through the scene on that day?
It was an apartment complex. I recall seeing a silver Ford Explorer, which we were advised was the officer's vehicle, and then some distance away were some belongings that belonged to the officer, eyeglasses, hat, and a chain.
And after the walkthrough, what, if anything, did you do next?
At that point, I made assignments. We worked together as a team to decide who's going to take lead, and then we start off with those assignments. So we had people photographing, some people taking notes, and then I assisted with searching the scene for any additional evidence that wasn't readily available.
And what, who advised you on what other evidence that you would be looking for?
It would be the homicide detectives.
And did they advise you on what other pieces of evidence that they may be looking for?
They asked us to search for the officer's badge and gun, possibly any projectiles, shell casings, or any defects in buildings or cars that may have been struck by projectiles.
And what, if any, of those items requested of you to look for did you find?
We didn't find any of those.
And what, if anything, did you do next on that scene?
I photographed the officer's vehicle.
Permission to approach, Your Honor?
Yes, ma'am.
I'm going to show you what's been marked as State's Exhibit number 20, 21, 22, or correction, 22 and 23. Ma'am, I'm going to ask you to look at State's Exhibit number 20, 21, 22, and 23. Do you recognize those?
Yes, I do.
And ma'am, how do you recognize them?
These are photographs of the apartment complex I responded to that day.
And ma'am, do those photographs accurately depict the scene as you recall it on that day?
Yes, they do.
And ma'am, did you take these photos?
No, I did not.
Do you recall who did?
No, I did not.
And, but can they help you illustrate your testimony here in court today?
Yes.
Your Honor, at this time I'd like to move that State's Exhibits 20, 21, 22, and 23 be introduced as illustrative evidence.
Wish to be heard?
No objection, Your Honor.
Thank you. State's Exhibits 20, 21, 22, and 23 are admitted for illustrative purposes.
Thank you, Your Honor. Permission to have these exhibits published by the overhead.
Allowed.
Thank you. Ma'am, if you could put State's Exhibit number 20 on the Elmo. If we could get a little bit of lights. You have permission to approach and adjust the focus.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Ma'am, if you could tell us what we're looking at here in this scene. And feel free, do you have a pen? If you can point out what she's looking at.
This is one of the driveways into the apartment complex. And this area here is where the officer's belongings were located.
And where was, I'm sorry, where were the officer's belongings located? That speck at the end?
Yeah, this close, that speck at the end, close to the dumpsters.
And ma'am, what I'm going to ask you to do is just, as we're pointing out, the court reporter is actually taking things down. So as we identify objects on the photograph, if you could vocalize for me what we're looking at.
Okay.
And ma'am, in the forefront, there's a large yellow bump. What was that on the roadway?
That's a speed bump.
And how far back do you recall was the officer's actual patrol car from this vantage point?
I'm sorry, I don't recall.
Okay. And if you'll please put up State's Exhibit number 21. Ma'am, can you tell us what we're looking at here in this photo?
This is what we would call a mid-range photograph, where we are moving in from the previous vantage point. Now you can actually see these are items as opposed to a speck that is closer to a dumpster.
And if we could take a look at State's Exhibit number 22. And could you tell us what we're looking at here in this photo?
These are the same items, just a little bit closer, also from a different vantage point, so you can more clearly see that there is a hat and a shoe and some other miscellaneous items, including papers here.
And if you could show us State's Exhibit number 23. And can you tell us what we're looking at here?
This would be a close-up image of a chain.
And are you familiar with what type of chain this is?
Yes, I am.
And can you tell us what type of chain this is?
This is the type of chain that's typically used by officers who are wearing their badge around their neck.
And are you familiar with the way that this chain actually opens?
Yes, I am.
And can you tell us, was it opened properly?
No, it was not.
How, based on your familiarity with these chains, how was this chain removed?
It appears to have been broken as opposed to being unclasped.
Thank you. If I might have a moment, Your Honor, and approach with counsel.
Yes, ma'am. Sure. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, you might have noticed when you came in this morning there was a sound out in the hallway. There was a malfunction of one of the courtroom doors, the little, electronic badge that gets you in and out, which cascaded to other things, including the room in which we put our exhibits overnight. So that's what we were checking on, is to actually see if it had been repaired and we could pull out some exhibits. So that's what that was, and that's what that alarm was. It wasn't a nuclear attack or anything. It was just strictly getting in and out of a building or an office. But it looks like all is well. Okay.
Thank you, Your Honor. This time I'd like to approach with the state's exhibit previously marked as 2 and 3 that were provided for illustrative evidence for your
Yes,
question.
ma'am. Thank you.
Ma'am, I'm going to show you state's exhibit number 2 and state's exhibit number 3. Do you recognize those photos?
Yes, I do.
And ma'am, how do you recognize those photos?
These are the photos that I did take of the officer's vehicle at the scene.
And ma'am, are those true and accurate as you saw them through that lens?
Yes, they are.
And ma'am, what type of equipment were you using to take that photo?
A Nikon digital camera, single lens reflex digital camera.
And have you been trained in how to use that camera?
Yes, I have.
And once that you took those photos, how were they transferred to the DA's office?
Our normal procedure is to upload them to our secure digital asset management system. Our secure digital asset management system. At that point, when the DA's office makes a request, we create a CD and forward that CD to the DA's office. There are also times when the DA's office will request actual physical photographs, which we can print out.
And was there a request to actually print out these photos?
Yes, there was.
And who actually printed out the photos and provided them to the state?
I did.
Your Honor, at this time I'd like to introduce state's exhibits number 2 and 3 for substantive evidence.
Wish to be heard.
Yes, Your Honor, I object to substantive evidence. I don't object to illustrative evidence.
Thank you. The court is going to allow, in its discretion, state's exhibits number 2 and 3 to be introduced as or admitted as substantive evidence.
Thank you, ma'am. Ma'am, if you could put state's exhibit number 2 on the overhead projector, Mr. Elmo. And ma'am, could you please state what you observed and what this picture is of?
This is of the officer's vehicle as it was when I arrived on scene in the apartment complex.
And ma'am, were you able to see if any of the, what if any items were turned on or off in the vehicle?
Can you explain?
Was there any emergency equipment that was activated?
Not at the time I was there, no.
There were no lights or sirens?
Objection to the leading, Your Honor.
Overruled.
The sirens were not on. I cannot say what the lights were on before I got there or not.
Okay. Looking at the picture, you weren't able to ascertain whether the emergency lights were on in that vehicle?
Objection to the leading.
Overruled. Try not to leave, please.
Yes, Your Honor.
I'm sorry, ma'am, I can't tell if they were on.
Okay. And if we can look at the next state's exhibit, state's exhibit number 3. And ma'am, can you tell us what we're looking at here?
This is also the front of the officer's vehicle, taken near the driver's side, looking as if you were driving down the apartment complex down that roadway. So it would be similar to the view that the driver had.
And ma'am, from this vantage point, are you able, is it a straight shot from where the officer parked his vehicle to where the items were found on the ground?
Not that I can see in this photograph now.
Thank you. Now, ma'am, were you on that day able to respond to 1718 Rosetta Drive?
Yes.
And what, if anything, did you do there?
As a supervisor, I check in with the people who are working. As a supervisor, I check in with the squad that is working to see if they need any assistance on scene. Another crime scene investigator was at this address, so I responded to see how she was doing, if she needed any help.
And do you recall who that crime scene investigator was?
It was Marilyn Coble, the shift supervisor.
And what, if anything, did you assist her with while on that scene?
She asked if I would assist in searching the attic area for the officer's badge and gun.
And approximately what time did you respond over to Rosetta?
It was about between 5 and 5:30 in the evening.
And were you able to locate those items at that house?
No, I was not.
And ma'am, did you do anything else with regard to this case?
Yes, I did.
And what was that?
I did a few other different activities.
Okay. And what activities did you do?
That same day, I responded to headquarters to photograph Carlos Reali. The next day, I packaged some evidence, and then about a week and a half later, I packaged some additional evidence.
And did you come in contact with a green towel that was collected?
Yes, I
And do you recall where that green towel was collected from?
did. May I refer to my report?
If that will refresh your recollection.
Yes, it will. The towel was located in temporary evidence storage locker number 66 within the Forensic Services Division.
And what, if anything, did you do with that towel?
I observed some suspected blood on the towel, so I tested it with a presumptive test to see if it was blood or if it was not.
And did you receive any indications based on your presumptive test?
The presumptive test indicated it was positive for blood.
Now, a presumptive test can't tell you if it was or was not blood, can it?
Correct. It is a presumptive test. Confirmatory testing in a laboratory is needed after that.
And were you able to find out where that towel came from based on looking at the information that you had available to you at the crime scene, or the crime lab?
Yes, I was.
And where was that towel taken from?
It was recovered from a Honda vehicle.
And what other items were taken from that Honda? Are you familiar with the items that were taken from the Honda?
Just the ones that I packaged that day.
And what items did you package?
I packaged a folding knife, a pair of green shorts, a red shirt, a pair of blue denim pants, the green towel, and a black shirt that was in a white plastic shopping bag.
Thank you. No further questions, Your Honor.
Questions, Mr. Charles?
Yes, sir. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So, in States Exhibit 2 and 3, you recall that parking lot, correct?
Yes, I do.
The driveway. And there was a slight incline down,
This slight, yes.
as it's shown in the photograph, correct?
Yes.
And as part of your job, you note the temperature when you arrived out there?
As the supervisor, not the lead, no, I do not.
And would someone be responsible for documenting the temperature?
It's not a requirement, but they may.
And just, do you recall that day what the temperature was? If you recall that morning when you got there?
No, it was December, it was cold.
And you've talked about one of your coworkers that you supervise, M. Coble.
Yes.
And who is M. Coble?
That's Marilyn Coble, the shift supervisor.
And what kind of experience is necessary to be a shift supervisor?
I believe at the time she was promoted, it was 3 years of experience as a crime scene investigator.
And is she good at her job?
Yes, she is.
And you supervise her, so you know.
Yes.
And among things that you worked on that day, or people under your supervision, there was fingerprints taken off certain items, or attempts to take fingerprints off certain items. I'm not asking for specifics, but I mean in general, that's something that would be done and was done here on certain items. Is that right?
I don't recall at this scene.
And not necessarily this scene, but the scenes you worked on with the DNA swabs on items that were put into evidence.
I'm sorry, I'm not sure what the question was.
Okay. As part of your job would be supervising crime scene investigators who would take swabs of various items to try to recover DNA, is that correct?
Yes.
And on some items that was done here?
I don't recall. I'm sorry, may I ask, are you referring to at the scene or in the case in general?
In the case in general?
Yes, in the case in general, that did occur.
And do you recall how many items?
Total from everybody?
Yes.
No, I'm sorry, I don't.
And were those items sent off to a lab?
That I don't know.
And when you described packaging evidence, was that to place it into property from the temporary storage into more long-term storage? Is that what you were referring to?
Yes, that's correct.
And then if items are being sent off to a lab, there's also packaging, and you have to keep track of who's responsible for mailing that off and keeping track of detailed records, correct?
Yes, that's done by the property and evidence section.
And one of the shift supervisor, Marilyn Coble's responsibility in this investigation was to collect gunshot residue. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. Could you describe for the jury what is gunshot residue and what would be done? So it's two questions, really.
Okay. Whenever you fire typically a handgun, there are particles that are emitted from various parts of the gun when the projectile, when the bullet is expelled from the barrel. The particles are typically barium, antimony, and lead. When we do gunshot residue testing, we use special pieces of equipment that are provided to us by a manufacturer to collect this gunshot residue. And typically when somebody fires a gun, the gunshot residue will be on their hands. So we use what we call, or what are provided to us, are like sticky tabs. It's a small plastic container with a top that's removable. On the inside of the top is just a little sticky pad. We take that pad and we tap it along the person's hands. After we've done that on both hands, on the side of the hand and on the palms, then we swab them afterwards with a nitric acid solution that is also part of the kit. Those swabs have been placed in a container, and then the whole kit is sealed up and sent to the lab for analysis. It's the lab that actually has to do the analysis to see if there is gunshot residue, if those particles are on the swabs and on the sticky tabs.
Thank you. And that's something Shift Supervisor Coble did for this investigation, correct?
Yes, she did.
And could you describe what the gunshot residue analysis information form is?
It's a form that is provided with the kit.
And what types of information are noted on that form?
It asks for the date and time that the gunshot residue was collected. It asks for any information we may have on the shooting itself in terms of did it occur inside, outside, what time it occurred, what were the activities of the person between the time of the gun being fired and the time the kit was collected. We also ask if the person has fired a gun at any point in time previous. There's probably more information I'm not recalling off the top of my head.
Thank you. And the description of the subject's activity between the time of the shooting and the time of the gunshot residue collection, that's important information, isn't it?
Yes.
And you're trained, and the Shift Supervisor Coble would be trained that you would take care to get accurate information there, correct?
We can only record the information that's given to us. It's not, we don't know if it's accurate or not.
And in this case, for Officer Stewart, what it said was V and suspect struggled in S car.
Objection, Your Honor. She didn't take it.
Sustain.
You're the supervisor for Ms. Coble, correct?
I was at that time, yes.
Okay. And did you review her work?
I don't recall if I did or if somebody else did. I probably did in this case.
Okay. So you reviewed her work in this case on the gunshot residue testing?
It's likely I reviewed her paperwork, yes.
And did you find that it was in compliance with what you require as a supervisor and what the Durham Police Department requires?
I don't recall.
May I approach you on
The witness?
the bench conference briefly?
Yes. give me one moment, please. Thank you. Next question?
Thank you. Ms. Hutchins, the gunshot residue analysis form, are those forms kept in the regular course of business as part of your job?
Yes, they're part of our case file.
Okay. And one of the questions that,
Your Honor, I'd object to this line of question and request to approach with counsel.
Ladies and gentlemen, if you would leave your page right here, and go with the sheriff, and to the jury deliberation. Remember all those admonitions I previously given. What I have you just we're outside the presence of the jury. Yes, Ms. Ellis.
Your Honor, it appears that counsel is attempting to pull this record in as a business record under the business record exception, which the state can't avail themselves of business records in utilizing law enforcement records. And I think that also extends to the defense not being able to use law enforcement records as business records.
can I make my offer of proof now? Would this be a good time to make my offer of proof since I have it in my brain and I might
Yes, go
forget?
ahead. That sounds like thunder.
It is.
All right.
It is.
It's justice raining down in the courtroom. I feel it.
All right. If you're,
Thank you.
we've got two things going on. The first thing is going to let Mr. Charles go ahead and put on there. I sustained objection to statements that were put in the Maryland Cobal's cover sheet that accompanies items that might be submitted to the lab, I believe, for analysis. I sustain that. Go ahead and do your offer of proof on that right quick, and then Ms. Ellis, we're going to be right back with your other matter. Mr. Charles.
Yeah, Ms. Hutchins, I'm standing because the Americans with Disabilities Act will allow me to stand. Thank you. So on this form, it says fill out the form request and then return the form to the kit envelope. So this is sent along with the swabs for testing. So the lab can look at this, and the lab relies on what's on here during the testing. Someone's saying yes. Kind of loud.
Could be saying no, but
Sounded like yes to me.
oh, sound like yes. Okay, go ahead with your question.
Yes, Ms. Hutchins. So this form is sent to the lab, correct?
It is sent to the lab. Whether or not they use it within their examination, I don't know.
And some of the subject information and the name of the person whose hand was swabbed, right?
Yes.
To identify whether they're living, whether they're right-handed or left-handed, things like that, correct?
Yes, that information is on the form.
Whether there's any debris or blood on the subject's hands.
Yes, that information's on the form.
And whether the subject has washed his or her hands since the shooting. That's another question.
Yes, so that's on the form.
Because if you wash your hands, it doesn't do any good to do this test, generally.
Generally.
And occupation,
Correct.
hobbies,
Correct.
does that might influence how whatever appears to be gunshot residue could have been someone fishes and uses lead weights or other things, correct?
Correct.
And then there's a brief description of the activity, and then whether they were close to a discharged firearm, another question,
Correct.
and other information, shooting information about what is known to the analyst when they're filling out this form. Is that right?
Well, it's information that was given to them, yes.
And often this information is coming from the person who you're swabbing their hand.
Typically, yes.
But it can come from other people.
Yes.
That would be my proffer, Your Honor. And there's also a date and time,
Yes.
and but no temperature.
That's not a field on that form, if I recall.
Okay. That would be my offer, Your Honor. Proffer.
And I recall, however, Mr. Charnes, is that all those questions on your proffer don't deal with what the question was that was asked when the objection
Exactly.
was interposed, and that is, did not that form say there was a struggle inside of the car? It's that part that was objected to, and I sustained the objection.
Can I put on what is in the,
Yes.
to put it on the record, write a brief description of subject's activity between the time of the shooting and the time of the gunshot residue or GSR collection, and here it has V circle plus suspect struggled in S car dash struggle W slash weapon comma 1 numeral 1 shot fired by officer. Thank you, that would be my proffer.
All right. Thank you. The ruling was that was not appropriate, and the objection to that was sustained, even if I found it to be relevant. I would have found that it would mislead the jury, just as I indicated up here at the bench. I'm not just going to allow summaries from the state, if the state's asking about it. It's just summaries that officers might have presented on an investigative level to come into evidence to try to say, for example, a statement by a person identifying Mr. Riley as the shooter, which I redacted, using that same sort of approach to this. And that, so, we go to that legal maximum again of sauce for goose and gander, but that's, I find it's consistent. I'm trying to be consistent on either side. But the proffer is there as to what the evidence would have been. That's nothing, ma'am, for a witness for you to respond to or anything like that. So we're through with the proffer. Now, the next question there was some line of questions begun that indicated that were the questions of, and I'm going to have to look up your name again, I'm sorry, Ms. Hutchins. Were these records kept in the ordinary course of business and things of that nature? And after we got through a bit of those are customarily questions we encounter when someone is wishing to qualify certain records as business records. And we got into a question or a question and a half or so. Ms. Ellis made her objection. If you'll stand up again there, please, Ms. Ellis, and state your objection and the basis.
Your Honor, the basis, my objection is that it appears that he is attempting to get this in as a business record. And so there or several questions. One, is he attempting to get this in as a business record and putting on evidence in the case? Two, it may be improper because this is a part of a law enforcement file. And once again, the state cannot use these reports to get in business records from information in the police report for anything. So once again, what's good for the goose is good for the gander. We cannot provide just a report of the law enforcement officers of anything as a business record.
All right, thank you. Now, Mr. Charnes, your opportunity to respond to the objection.
I don't have a very strong opinion about the rest of this information, but it talks about whether it's corroborative of other evidence about whether Officer Stewart is right-handed. It says he's right-handed. Talks about he didn't wash his hands. I mean, you've made your ruling, so if it includes this, which I didn't understand it did, then I had no further questions, and I've made my offer of proof about what kind of things are on this form.
My ruling dealt with the question of the form saying what occurred, activity occurred inside the vehicle. That was all that was objected to. That was all that was dealt with. This next line of inquiry and the objection made as to it is whether this report comes in or this document comes in as an ordinary business record. It seems to me it's fairly settled law that police reports, even though kind of made during the course of them investigating stuff, are not admissible as business records generally. This is somewhat in the nature of a police report. I'm searching for a distinction that would make this something different. The information on the report, such as I retrieved this stuff on this date and I sent it off on this date and this is the address to which I sent it, that's kind of more of a business record kind of aspect. The other things are more investigative types of information, even were you right-handed or left-handed, that sort of thing. But certainly it seems other issues that might be why the officer is or an officer wants this sent off to be examined, that really shouldn't be evidence against Mr. Riley, but also shouldn't be evidence against the other side. It just ought not be considered at all in the case.
If I just maybe heard also that business record is more of a hearsay exception when a person is not available. And Ms. Coble is both on our witness list and the defense's witness list. So I don't even think that under that it would generally be, it should even be argued that it would come under a business record exception when he has the opportunity to call her as a witness and talk to her.
Well, we always have that, still have that protection and that cloak that says that a defense, it's not always a valid reason not to allow the defendant to ask a question, that the defendant can always put on evidence to produce this, because the defendant doesn't have to put on evidence. The defendant cannot be made to put on evidence. And that's just not a policy, that's like chiseled in rock. And so, on balance of that, I generally don't welcome not welcome, that's not right. I generally don't consider that the defendant can put on evidence as a reason. There needs to be some other reason. The reason here, I believe, is that if these reports can contain matters that are not the personal information of this witness that's testifying, it's always information provided that it's not admissible for that reason, and I find that it does not fit the business record exception. I believe I'm going to hearken back to the proffer you made previously about some of those things that you were asking the witness about. That I'm going to consider that proffer also kind of encompasses this ruling about the business record, so that the record is complete with what would have been allowed if the ruling had been otherwise. Anything else you want to add on the proffer, Mr. Chalmers?
I do not.
All right. Thank you. All right. Any other matters before the jury return?
Nothing from the state, Your Honor.
Thank you.
I would like to come to break.
That will be fine. Let's tell the jury that we'll be on our 10-minute break. Would that give everybody enough time if we come back at 4 o'clock?
Yes,
That
for the
works?
defense.
Works. All right, we'll be in recess until 4 o'clock. You may sit down and sit there either way you do. Thank you.
Close to recess, 10 minutes.